So you set up family meetings, and you and your family have gotten together. You've decided how you're going to make decisions with amongst each other. You've talked about your desires to stay together as a family, and that you want the whole family to be as one and move forward together, whether it's with your business or without. But you really want to set up that framework so that the family stays together and prospers over the generations. Well, that's a great first step, and it is the necessary required step if you really want to start setting up family governance. But the first step after that, once you're together and you're going to make these decisions and we've got an open discussion, is to come up with some policies. And you really have to have policies before you need them. You don't want to wait until an issue comes up and then now you're going to set up these policies, because it looks like at that point that you're making decisions and making judgments about what people want to do. Or maybe you're doing these things just because you want to prevent someone else to have their objective. If everyone knows the rules ahead of time because we've agreed upon them, then no one can say something is unfair. No one can say that anyone's out to attack or get anybody. And that's really what you don't want to avoid. That's what's going to cause the family to break up. And there are some eventualities that may just happen that you have to really kind of prepare for. So there really are 4 types of policies that everyone should have as a part of their family governance and should have a discussion. Now, these types of policies, they can be different for each family dynamic, each family's goals are different, but you really need to have something. And that first one, especially when there's a family business involved, has got to be that family employment policy. At what point can someone enter the family business? In what role? Is it merit-based? Do they have to go work outside of the business beforehand? Things like that. Those kinds of things are usually very interesting, and they are something that everyone's concerned about. They want to know who has that kind of power, who gets to have that right. Can people just expect to get a job from the business? What happens with in-laws and things? These things cause a lot of tension within the family, so you might as well set up at least a base policy. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be changed later, but there has to be some baseline expectation and something going forward so people know what's open for discussion, so that when someone comes and says, hey, I want my husband who isn't a blood member of the family to come in, it doesn't cause controversy and people don't express feelings for the first time. It needs to be something that's fair and objective, so that's what you've got to really set up. And the next policy you want to look at is a redemption policy. Some point, somewhere, some family member, some branch of the family is going to want to leave the family structure and cash out. We hope that doesn't happen. We set things up to make it unnecessary, but that's going to happen at some point. And you can't just not let it happen. Most states' laws are going to let someone come in and say, hey, I want out of this thing. They won't tear the whole thing down, but that person is going to be able to take their share and get out. Talk about under what circumstances that's going to be. Make it an orderly transition. How is that going to be funded? Under what circumstances it's going to happen? How can you wait with that? You can't just leave it to where it can never happen. It's going to have to be one of those things where they can kind of get out and not feel trapped, because they're going to cause a court issue with it. Most of the time, there's at least some avenue, some way that the court will make that happen. You can do your best you can. It could be expensive for them. It could be costly. It could be hard. But if they're really determined, they're going to find a way. And they're going to make everyone else's life miserable until we resolve that issue. So until you either convince them to stay in, then they're going to have that pressure and tension in the family. And you might want to at least have a mechanism for that so that it doesn't mess with people's fiduciary duties when they finally say, I want out. But now you say, nope, not going to happen. And you start to make steps to block that. Then there could be fiduciary duties involved. So that's why you want to have that stuff set up and you want to think about it. And I'm sure we'll go over that in detail in a different video. The other thing you want is to talk about your dividend and distribution policies. People who are working inside the business probably get a salary, but they're probably not the only ones who have any kind of ownership interest. Those other people who don't have an ownership interest are going to need to access cash from time to time. Life happens. They're going to need to get money out. And it might not always just have to be at the end of the year like it's a bonus thing, because they're going to look at everyone who's getting that salary, and sure, you might be working in there and earning that if you're inside it. But other people have different lives. They have different business objectives. Maybe their business isn't paying them like the family business is. Maybe they are stay-at-home parents, or maybe they are artists or something, and they don't have that regular income. Something might happen in life where they need to have access to cash. So you need to talk about what happens and when you don't want to get out, but you need money, how you can approach that to get things out of that with the business and how the family is going to deal with that. That's your next policy that really has to be discussed if you're going to keep a business or keep any kind of wealth in the family and have it go through the generations and prosper and keep the family together. The final policy you should talk about is a irrevocable retirement policy. Now, a lot of our patriarchs and matriarchs and founders don't like this policy, and they may not have it, or they may put it in place for people that are after them, but it needs to happen. At some point, each generation is going to want to take the reins. And we're not going to want to wait till someone dies. We're not going to wait till someone decides to retire, because people do stay in seats too long. And business changes, and if the business doesn't change with the times, it affects the entire family. And it may not be the fiduciary right thing for the board to let someone stay into those positions. So you need to think about what irrevocable and mandatory retirement means. It usually is good to kind of choose an age that's neutral, but you want to talk about these things ahead of time. And you want to talk about maybe what are the triggers of disability and things, and how those things get changed and how that torch gets handed off. You don't want that to come up when you've got a really talented family member that you've been grooming for 25 years who wants his shot, but because you're going to stay in the job for another 10 and he has no way up there in sight and says, this is holding me back for him to leave. That hurts the family. That hurts the business. It's not what's best. So you should talk about those things ahead of time so that there are no misconceptions. And these really are the 4 basic policies that every family should have in place if they're going to have a business or wealth that transitions on. There are other policies that should be in place and things like that. But once you get your meeting structure set up, people have bought into the meetings, you've talked about your goals, you've talked about how the meetings are going to be structured, how you're going to make decisions. These should probably be the first decisions that are made before you move on to other policies.